Welcome, Deborah.
Thank you very much, Philip. Hello, everybody. It's nice to see everybody and nice to see so many familiar faces. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Deborah Frost. I'm the newly appointed Chief Exec of Personal Group. My previous incarnation was a Chief Exec of Inecto. The apple didn't fall very far from the tree. Inecto was bought by Personal Group and I became Chief Exec in March. So it's all been very recent. But my aim today is the same as it always is, which is to really give you a chance to have some interesting stuff, some data, some background, and hopefully send you away with some new ideas on how to implement a wellbeing strategy. What I also want to do today is perhaps I was really interested in what Dan was saying in the keynote session about how there are some members of our workforce who are perhaps less advantaged than others. And those are the people perhaps who are working for you in your warehouse, they might be working in a shop, they might be working in a hotel. And those are the people that perhaps we focus on particularly today and think about how can a wellbeing strategy reach those individuals and what can we do to support people in that type of environment to make it accessible for them to get in touch with what's going on. So slides are up now. What I want you to do before we start is I just want you to close your eyes. No, I mean it, close your eyes. I can still see your eyes open, close away. Close your eyes and imagine that you're on a busy street. You can hear cars, you can hear lorries, you can hear the odd police car siren in the distance. Next to you, there's a man and he's digging up the street with a pneumatic drill. Someone's trying to call you, but you can't hear properly and the message is very garbled. You can feel your stress levels rising, but you can't concentrate on what's going on. You just want to get out of the situation, but you can't because this noise follows you all the time when you're at work, at home, at night in bed. Imagine the noise isn't actual physical noise. It's in your head, it's debt worries, it's relationship worries, it's concerns about the future. You know you're probably drinking or eating too much, but you need to do it to help you escape from the noise. Right, you can open your eyes now. Hopefully you've got some idea of what the sort of pressure is like for some of our employees. We've had really interesting sessions today on managing debt, physical well-being, mental well-being. I think sometimes we don't necessarily recognise that in our efforts to engage people at work, it's not particularly that they're not engaged with work, it's just that they're disengaged because there is so much else going on in people's minds. And it's hard for them to think about work. It's hard for them to bring their whole self to work or be engaged or be productive because actually all the time in the background there's that man with a pneumatic drill saying you haven't paid your credit card bill or your tenancy runs out at the end of the month, where are you going to live? These sorts of problems are probably much more current for employees who are towards the lower levels in your organisation. And ironically, those individuals who may be struggling the most are probably the furthest away from your management team. So it's harder for the management team to necessarily think about them. So on the basis, and this stat's been said about 400 times today, 57% of working days last year that were lost to work were due to stress and mental pressure. So I don't need to tell you what an issue it is for organisations. I think where we are today is that the tipping point in wellness has been reached. It's actually more costly for organisations to do nothing than it is for them to start to integrate some strategies to allow your employees to start to be able to tune down that pneumatic drill that's going on at home. I thought you might like to see another survey because we've not seen enough graphs today either. What this shows is the top line, the blue line, is a group of organisations, their employees, for people who've used some wellness and engagement strategies. The other lines are essentially men, which is the orangey middle line. Men is the grey line. Everybody as a group is the orange line, and women are the top line. And that just shows how over the last 3 years, engagement and happiness levels at work have dropped. In 2017, when we first ran the survey, 51% of people said that most of the time at work they were happy. That's dropped to 41%. But worryingly, 26% of us say we are never happy at work. That's a quarter of your workforce is basically thinking, I really hate this. I think the problem is that if we can't get through to employees, if we can't reach them with some of the things that you're spending money on, I mean, there's some fantastic stuff out there. I don't know about you, but I hadn't seen any of it before. Some physical well-being things, some mental health well-being things. But if you can't reach your employees with those things, it's not really going to impact this graph, because there's so much else going on. We can't do much about Brexit. We can't do much about things like internet crime, but we can do things where it makes a difference to people's everyday lives. And that might be supporting financial well-being, physical well-being, or mental well-being. Again, this slide just shows you what we've been talking about really all day, an integration of our different approaches. So under physical well-being, we might include things like online health assessments. We might talk about stopping smoking or weight management. You might think about, can I put an online GP on there, because it's hard for people to get GP appointments. Can I make it easier for them to reach things at work? And then finally, and other things that are more standard, like discounted gym membership. Under the mental well-being, I've put in employee assistance programs, debt advice, mindfulness, legal advice. Under financial, we've got payroll loan schemes, discounts and offers, good, simple protection products. One of the sessions I was in was saying people are very underprotected from an insurance point of view for things like death and life cover. And then online financial assessment and guidance. I'm just going to ask you to have a look at Slido now and just tell me, in your organisation, and obviously not everybody's got exactly the same thing, but roughly out of those 12 different parts of the wheel, how many do you think you're able to support your staff with? I think one of the things that I found difficult in putting this slide together is that those sectors are quite artificial. So, for example, where would you put debt advice? Does that go in mental well-being, or should that go in financial? Does mindfulness go in mental health or physical health? And from my point of view, if you don't have an integrated strategy, if you go large on financial or you go large on physical, the difficulty is that it's quite hard to unpick the differences. And if we're trying to support our employees in all aspects of their life so that they can be happier and more engaged at work, it's important to think about how you're going to balance all of those different things. I don't know how many of you were in the session with Carrie Cooper. He sort of said, there's a danger in we go for the low-hanging fruit. We go for the hour-long meditation classes and, we do a bit of yoga in the morning. But actually, some of the bigger things are tougher to implement and they take longer time. And therefore, for those of you who have come today, obviously you're in a varied place on your journey. Some people will be saying, we're doing really well. But others of you may well be saying, actually, we've got a discounted gym membership down the road, and sometimes we offer fruit at lunchtimes, but it's really not that strong. So going on to the Slido slide, I'll be interested to see how many of you have got a strong percentage. Actually, that's pretty good, isn't it? There's 10% of people who are saying, actually, we haven't really got going yet. And there's a few who are saying, we're really organised. A quarter of you are very organised. And about 70% are saying, we've made some difference, but we'd probably like to do more. And I think that's quite a sound reflection of our client base. What we find with our client base is that those companies tend to have a mix of different things, and it might not be particularly integrated. So let me give you a couple of case studies of where we've worked in two different areas, and we've really been able to make a difference for our clients because of the way that we've been able to deliver our approach. So one of the areas that we look at in detail is male mental health. Now, it's not particularly fashionable to talk about male mental health, particularly for the midlife industrial sector male. That group is, according to ONS, is the most dissatisfied with their life, but they're also the most difficult to reach from a mental health point of view. And there are those that say, well, men don't really suffer with mental health issues as much as women. But perhaps if I tell you that 76% of suicides are men, and it's the leading cause of death under the age of 45, men are 3 times more likely than women to become dependent on alcohol, 95% of the prison population is male, and 87% of rough sleepers are men. That tells us that actually men have mental health problems. The problem that men have is that they find it really difficult to access help. And that might be about stigma, or it might be about how do I get these services. So what we set out to understand at PG was how can we encourage people to access the services that they need. What we found was quite an astonishing statistic, actually. Over the last year, the number of men, this is men who are employed by our clients, so it's a data set of about 250,000, so it's not insignificant. of that population, around the increase in the number of men that had contacted the EAP for help had gone up by 84%, which is really quite an enormous number. And in the equivalent period, the number for women had gone up by 6%. So it wasn't just that it was suddenly more accessible to everybody. Now, you might see that as a negative indicator of men's worsening mental health, but I also think there's an argument to say it's just that men feel like they can access their services. And we asked the EAP provider to compare our client set with their general client set, and what we found was that, generally speaking, about 2/3 of people that contact the EAP are women, only 1/3 are men. And in our data set, 55% were men. So we're clearly finding something quite different to the norm here. And why do we think that is? Well, it comes down to something we think quite simple. An awful lot of that male population for our clients, tend to work in warehouses. They might drive a lorry, they might drive a bus. And because of that, having a benefit system that's entirely based on your company intranet is pointless. Because even if you do have a computer somewhere in the warehouse, it's unlikely that a man who's struggling with drinking problems or they know they've got debt issues, they're not going to try and get in the office and get the phone number. But if they've got an app with all of the details integrated into one place, and they can access the EAP or they can access legal support, and they can do it privately, on their own, at night, at the weekend, that really drives usage. So I think what we've discovered is that by tailoring the delivery of the solution to the needs of your employees, you really can make a difference. So wherever they're working, they can access that information and they can find it in a way that suits them. And the stats, the 84% increase, I think just demonstrates the power of being able to give employees a solution which is based on their phone rather than based on a desktop at work. Another area I wanted to highlight, again, just thinking again about your integrated wellness strategy, is female financial health. Now, some of the other speakers that I've seen today have touched a little bit on this. It's actually a massive issue. We've talked so much, haven't we, over the last 2 or 3 years about the gender pay gap. And the gender pay gap sits at around about 18%. The gender pension gap is significantly more than that. It's about 40%. So if you think about that as a year in someone's life, the average male's employee's pension will last him until December. The average female runs out of money in early August. That's the difference. That's the fact of the way that it works. And that's from lots of reasons. It's partly because women perhaps work part-time. It's perhaps because they take periods out of the workplace. It's also sometimes because women aren't as good at protecting themselves in the future years. They don't think of it as important, perhaps, as men do. And so one of the things that we did, again, with PG ourselves, this was our own piece of work that we did, was we ran workshops and things around the auto-enrolment time in April, because the employee contribution went up quite considerably. How many of you also did workshops and things to encourage people not to opt out? Yeah, 1 or 2, okay. But that was a really interesting thing to do, because what it did was we didn't just aim it at women, we aimed it at everybody, but what it did was we actually had a very high retention rate. In fact, only 2 people dropped out with a promise that they're going to come and have another look at it next year. But more than that, it drove focus around people looking at the benefits side. So we could see on there's a central system within Happy that allows you to look at your stats, and we could see a lot of people had gone and looked at their pension. But they also had improved take-up and all the other things, because having an integrated system has a sort of spiralling positive effect, because if you drive attention to pension and it's on the same app as EAP or other savings products or discounts and offers, it means that people can easily see them all in one place. And I think the disadvantage of having things all over the place is sometimes people don't connect them together in the way that they might. But by having a solution which allows you to track whether or not your advice is making any difference, and being able to take that data to a board meeting or even to the people concerned and say, do you realise what's going to happen? 10% of women have opted out of the pension contributions, and this is the likely effect in future years. It allows you to start giving people the chance to make changes while they've still got time. So both male mental health and female financial health, not particularly popular topics, but I think they're really important ones for you to think about in your wellness strategy. And again, it picks up on what Kerry Cooper was saying. Let's look at the things that really affect people's lives. Let's look at the pneumatic drill issues rather than just looking at the nice to do stuff, you know, without disrespect to the choir, but, you know, the choir or doing lunchtime meditation sessions. It's the stuff that really makes a difference to people's lives that we talk about. And then I've also been asked to talk about let's talk about the difference between short and long-term thinking. There's always a challenge, isn't there? Because you want to get on with doing interesting stuff and you want to put some excitement into things. But if you just throw lots of short-term things into your basket, the danger is that you don't have any sort of integration into your strategy. So first of all, think about the pneumatic drill issues. So you might say, right, let's put into our platform, let's put something in that allows employees to access loans or consolidate their debts at a reasonable interest rate. You might also say, look, we've got a lot of employees out on the road, we've got a lot of lorry drivers, we've got salespeople who spend a lot of nights away from home. If we give them access to an online GP, they can get their repeat prescriptions wherever they are. They can get them sent through and get a prescription, whether they're in Aberdeen or Isle of Wight, they can pick it up. So those sorts of short-term wins might help you, give you a bit of time to think about your longer-term strategy whilst you think about what are the real things that matter to our organisation. And what I particularly want to focus on here is what type of organisation are you? So we've seen lots of different solutions today out there. There are lots of different providers. But you need to work out, are we the sort of organisations that has millennials on beanbags, you know, with beanies playing football at lunchtime on the machines? Or are we an organisation which has a lot of older men who are worried about heart attacks, who know they're still smoking and know they're drinking too much? So thinking about your organisation and the type of people drives you then into what your long-term strategy might be. And some of those long-term strategies might take time to come to fruition. Helping people with weight management or encouraging people to think about how they might stop smoking don't have immediate results, but they do have results in the longer term, and they can help improve wellness around the organisation for the longest time. And then my final slide is really to talk about how do you actually make sure this sticks. These are two real-life PG clients, two distribution and logistics companies, so they're both the same type of organisation. We have two different programs in the way that we go out to staff, and I think it's really important because you can do the best design in the world. You can think about your strategy, it can be really good, the board accepts it, but unless you get it out to your staff, it's never going to stick and it's never really going to work. So what we did with the company on the left-hand side, which had 72% engagement, that means 72% of people were registered and were using their benefit system, was we actually went down and met with them face-to-face. We sat down with people and we talked to them about what the benefits are that they have, and we were able to co-fund that with some of the products that we were able to sell to them. On the other hand, for the straightforward, just put in a benefits program and let it go, what we found that we only had 13% engagement. So at the end of your first year of your wellness strategy, you don't want to be going back to the board and going, you know what, only 13% of people have used it. It's really important that you start to engage and make sure that people stick with and use your solution and find it helpful. So in conclusion, the data would suggest that we are at a tipping point where a wellbeing strategy is more cost-effective for you than not having anything at all. And engaging employees with any wellbeing solution needs to be designed for your own organisation requirements. It can't be a one-size-fits-all solution. Our specialism at Personal Group is to make sure that you've got the tools to work with our specialist sort of clients, and that tends to be organisations where people are out working, digging up the road, working in a warehouse, working in hotels, working in a care home, where they're not driving a desk every day. And we've worked hard to develop innovative solutions that those sorts of people and those sorts of roles can get active. So if you're serious about addressing wellbeing in your workforce, you need not just a clean design, but you need to think beyond that about how you're going to get to delivery. Thank you very much. Are there any questions?